shall I? Okay. Can everyone hear me this time? Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to welcome everyone and thank you all for attending today. Welcome to the Education, Children and Families Policy Committee. The meeting today is open to the public and is being webcast. We have received no questions or petitions from members of the public by the submission deadline. Could I please request that mobile phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff and the assembly point is in Tudor Square. If I could just go around now and ask each member of the committee to introduce themselves. If I could start over here with Councillor Rooney, please. Okay. Councillor Holmeshaw, could you... Oh, he's got it. It's okay. Thank you. Have you all logged in? Okay, if we start with Councillor Holmeshaw, thank you.
I'll do it again. Right, I've joined you there, Mick. Councillor Brian Holmeshaw, Green Party Councillor for Broomhill and Sharrow Vale Ward and Deputy Chair of this committee.
Councillor Mary Lee, Councillor for Darnell Ward.
Councillor Rooney.
I'm sorry about that, Chair. Just to say to the members of the public that might be watching, we are not actually as incompetent as that looked. It's just that some of us are challenged when it comes to IT issues. I'm Councillor Mick Rooney, the co-chair of that, and I was in the middle of obeying the instruction of turning my phone off, and that's why you caught me unawares. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Councillor Anne Murphy, Councillor for the Manor Castle Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Peter Garbett for Netheredge and Sharrow Ward.
Councillor Anne Whittaker for West Ecclesfield Ward.
Councillor Colin Ross, Councillor for Dore and Totley Ward.
And I'm Councillor Dawn Dale, Councillor for Shire Green and Brightside Ward and co-chair of this committee. If I could just ask officers to introduce yourselves as well, please.
No. Hi, I'm Fiona Martinez. I'm a Principal Democratic Services Officer here.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Bennett, Assistant Director of Legal and Governance.
Andrew Jones, Director of Children's Services.
I'm Ryan Keyworth, Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Thank you. For members of the public, the agenda and reports for today's meeting are available on the Council's website. Paper copies are also available in the meeting and there is an agenda report pack plus 2 supplementary packs. I would like to refer today to a change in proposed order of business with regards to the agenda. I would like to move item 8 of the agenda, which is the budget proposal for 23-24, to item 14 on the agenda. The reason for this is that part of the proposal will be in closed session, in which point we will stop broadcasting, and that would then allow members of the public to leave the meeting without having to come back in. Is everyone in agreement with that? I will be mindful of time so that we have got time to debate and discuss so that we don't run out of time. Do I have anyone who objects to me moving the things around on the agenda? No? Thank you very much. So, item number 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please, Fiona?
Apologies. Councillor Gail Smith has registered her apologies.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is exclusion of public and press, and as I've just explained, item A, Appendix 1, is restricted. If members of the committee wish to discuss the information in those restricted documents, we will need to have the discussion in private, which we've just made allowances for. Are we all still in agreement with that? Thank you. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Yes, Councillor Murphy.
I'm a respite foster carer. I'm also a consultant social worker that works with families that one or both parents might have got a substance misuse issue.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Ross, are you wishing to speak?
I'm a member of the Education Advisory Board at Aldine House, which is referred to in the budget papers.
Thank you. Any more declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 5 on the agenda is minutes from the previous meeting. Can we all agree that the meetings are a true record of the meeting and are there any matters arising? Are we agreed? Thank you. Item 6, public questions and petitions. We've had none received. So we move on to item 7, which is the work programme, which is page 11 on the agenda report pack, and it was presented by Sarah Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. So the committee's work programme is attached to Appendix 1 of the report for the committee's consideration and discussion. It aims to show all known substantive agenda items for forthcoming meetings of the committee to enable the committee, other committees, officers, partners and the public to plan their work with and for the committee. The report also documents any changes made since the last time we met as a committee, and the report recommends that the committee's work programme is agreed, so that's as set out in Appendix 1. And that includes any additions and amendments identified in Part 1. The committee is also asked to consider whether there are any further items that you would like to be added to Part 2 of the appendix. I think that's all, Chair. There are no referrals from other committees.
Councillor Holmeshaw.
Could you just describe what's in part 2 of the agenda to me while I'm looking through it? What would that cover normally?
Part 2 of the report.
Yes, of the report.
Sorry, Councillor. Part 2 of the work programme is a list of potential items that aren't yet actually scheduled for a specific meeting. So that's items either that officers have suggested should be on the work programme but you've not agreed a particular date for, or items that the committee has asked be considered for submission to the work programme but haven't actually been given a meeting date yet.
Yes, if I could make a suggestion. So at the July meeting, we mentioned and when in fact the committee voted to have the corporate opportunities register as part of this, the regular committee programme. I think we got a response to that from Ryan Keyworth. You mentioned it, Ryan, as corporate opportunities agenda register.
Yes, I think I did, and I think I suggested that was perhaps best held at committee level rather than at council level, because it made more sense to do so.
So can we add that in each time to the agenda that we have, the work plan?
We can, Chair. Can I just clarify, is that something you want in adding as an item, as in you wish it to be brought to be for discussion, or are you wanting that to be a standing item at every meeting?
Thank you. If I can just come in, because I wasn't at, unfortunately, I'm just going to take this to Councillor Rooney because he chaired the previous meeting.
Yes, it is working. I think, Brian is correct about that, but I think just for if there is anybody actually watching this, I think if you could, Ryan, if you could explain just exactly what that means, corporate opportunities, because it would be, well, it would be helpful not only to the public, but maybe one or two of us in the room. And I suspect that it may be something that is, okay, we could put it as a potential standing item, but I suspect there won't be anything that we could discuss at every single meeting. it might be, as it says, an opportunity. So if you could just clarify, Ryan, what we're actually talking about, please.
I'll do my best, Councillor Rooney. My understanding of this, and I wasn't at the council meeting that discussed this, is there was a motion passed at full council that suggested that a corporate opportunities register be created, and that's what Councillor Holmeshaw is referring to. I think he raised that particular issue at this committee meeting, or the last meeting of this committee. I'm not quite sure why the question was addressed at me at the time. I think it came up alongside the budget monitoring conversation that we were having at that point in time. And my suggestion back to the committee was that would be much better held by the committee and not as a central corporate, what could easily turn into a bureaucratic exercise. The purposes of an opportunities register is to a certain extent, it's a risk register with a slightly different focus. In fact, risks can be beneficial to an organisation as well as detrimental to an organisation. So I think that the specific intent behind the motion at council was to encourage members and officers to think about risks that had an upside potential, as well as concentrating on risks that have a downside potential, with a view to exploiting the risk that has upside potential at the same time as mitigating those that have a downside potential. Councillor Holmeshaw, maybe if you could, does that correspond with your understanding?
That sounds very much like the thing that I voted for in full council a few months ago. Yes. Yeah, and I think it did come up to you alongside the budget discussions.
Councillor Rooney.
I think it came up to you, Ryan, because you happened to be in the same room as we were. I think that's probably the reason why. So my suggestion would be that, given that I think we have a general understanding of what we're talking about, that it is actually registered as a standing item, even though there may not be anything to discuss at that particular meeting. If you could try and trawl through whatever paperwork or whatever documents you can find, and if there is the opportunity, we could discuss that next time. Is that okay? Does that sound sensible and reasonable? And I suppose I'm, through you, Chair, I'm directing that to Councillor Holmeshaw.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, as a standing item, a rolling item on the agenda, however you like to describe it, I think that's good.
Thank you. I'll just ask members if we're in agreement for that to be a standing item in future on our agenda. Are we all in agreement? Well, nobody said no, so I'm assuming that's a yes. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item number 8, which is... Yeah, so I've just been asked that, does everybody agree that the work programme is otherwise agreed with an amendment to have a standing item as requested by Councillor Holmeshaw? Yeah,
agree.
Thank you. We'll now skip from item 8 to item number 9 on your agenda, which is Revenue Budget Monitoring Report, and I understand that's over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. In front of the committee is the month 4 revenue budget monitoring report. That includes the dedicated schools grant as well for this committee. It includes a standard overview that we've provided to each committee of the council's overall position, which you'll see from the document is £21.7 million, forgive me, overspend. That's a forecast full year position. It's a relatively similar position to previous months, so that the underlying position has not altered much in the last couple of months. But what we have done is now built in our best estimate of the 22-23 pay award. The council in the revenue budget in March provided 4% across the board for a pay award, and we now expect the pay award, when it finally lands, to average out at something closer to 6%. The impact of that on this committee is about £1 million, and you can see a reconciliation of the pay award compared to some savings that have been made in the month, and how that actually plays out. So for this committee specifically, we are forecasting, or your officers are forecasting, a £7.5 million overspend for the year. There's a small overspend forecast within integrated commissioning. Most of the overspend, as you'd expect given the size of the budget, is within children and families. The main reasons for that overspend are the same as they were when I last came to this committee. Capital works that we were hoping to deliver and develop to reduce ongoing operating costs have essentially been found not to be financially viable. So the cost of doing the works far exceeds the benefit case that we hoped to achieve at the time. And a £1.4 million planned saving on business support officers, which is in the budget for this year, relies on our ability to recruit qualified social workers or more qualified staff to replace the work done by business support. The idea is you have more qualified staff and far fewer business support staff. Recruitment in this area, as in all areas of social work actually, is proving incredibly difficult for us to do, and that's delaying the implementation of that saving, which is causing a movement in the budget. The final substantial reason is around a contribution to the work of this committee, particularly children and families, from the health services that we had hoped to secure. As the year goes on, it's becoming increasingly unlikely that we'll achieve that saving or that contribution this year. But as I think I've said here before, we have certainly not given up on it. And work is going on to work out how we can approach the NHS in a way that gets, frankly, some more financial support for the work of this committee from NHS funds. On the dedicated schools grant, we are forecasting an overspend of around £2.2 million. Fundamental underlying reason here is the rising cost of placements for people or children with special educational needs. Chair, that's all I particularly wanted to say. Obviously happy to take any questions that members have, and I might just fair warning to officers in the room, if the answer's better coming from you, I might ask you to help me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any questions? So I've got Councillor Ross and then Councillor Murphy and Councillor Lee.
Yeah, it's referring on page 35, the residential strategy, and in particular the Aldine House forecast savings. I'm puzzled, and I'd just like it explained to me how this was included in this present year's budget, because it's predicated on a new secure unit being built, which doesn't exist. There's no site identified for it. There's no planning permission, there's no architectural plans, no capital which would be needed from government identified for it. So there was savings, revenue incorporated in this year's budget and ongoing income from something that doesn't exist. How on earth did it get included in the budget, which has given us this £2 million problem going forward?
I suppose in respect of the fact that none of the senior officers who were involved in submitting that as a budget last year are with the council anymore, I'll answer the question directly. We were hoping last year, at this time last year, to purchase a building that's very close to Aldine House and redevelop it. That was the plan. And that was the discussion that we had 12 months ago, in the hope that we could do that quite quickly. Now, whether we'd have been able to finish it much before the end of this financial year, I don't know, and probably not is the honest answer. And one of the reasons I was happy to include it in the budget, provided it actually made some progress, was that we put aside £25 million in the revenue budget last year to deal with delivery and timing issues relating to business budget implementation plan savings. This was one of those I particularly had in mind when I did that. If we hadn't taken that chance, that risk, opportunity you might say, I'd have just required another £2 million of savings from this committee's work. So we were faced with a rather difficult challenge of further cuts to a service that had already, frankly, struggled to hit the budget target it was set. Or we took a risk and opportunity on potential capital investment. There were two types of capital investment we were looking at, actually. There was the Aldine House investment, which at the time seemed like, frankly, quite a good idea. The idea that Aldine at the time was full. It was fully staffed and making a surplus. I know that that's changed in the last 12 months. And the idea that we could expand that and potentially get government support to do it seemed like something that was well worth pursuing. You know, as it turned out with hindsight, obviously we shouldn't have done it. The second capital opportunity is actually part of the measures that are included in this year's budget. So I don't think I'm straying too far into the closed appendix. In fact, I'm not straying into it at all. But in the budget for this year, there was a plan put forward to create children's home capacity, council-owned and run, within the city of Sheffield. Fairly small measure, actually, that would reduce the number of expensive out-of-city places that we needed. Again, the initial work that we did on it suggested it made sense to do that. The further work that we've done on it suggests that's pretty hard to do and pretty hard to make work. I think there's an alternative approach to this in the same vein, but not exactly the same, that's included in the papers later on in the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, which partly answers my question. I think I know the building that you were, which is on the market close to Aldine House, and avoiding anything that might be coming in part two. I still don't think that building could have been converted into a secure children's home within the 12 months, knowing its previous purpose and its configuration. So I think it was, I don't think any revenue income from a second Aldine house should have been included in this year's budget, is my opinion.
If I can just come back on that, please. Yeah. I'll say this now in advance of later on. Experiences like that one particular are why I'm going to be quite a lot harder on savings proposals this year. I don't have 25 million in reserves left to back the risk, but I am going to be quite a lot harder on savings proposals this year. So the savings proposals the committee will discuss later on, I haven't signed them off yet. So we will need to be, the committee will need to be mindful of that, is that I don't have the reserves behind me this time to back some of the risks, opportunities that we took in last year's budget.
Thank you, and I respect that view that you've just articulated there.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Similar really to what was posed last year in the budget and the cuts we were aiming for in terms of staffing and particularly recruitment of new social workers. That came up last year and the year before in terms of we were going to do some specific work to improve the recruitment of new social workers and the retention of social workers. Can you just expand a little bit more for new members, but also for me, what the barriers are to us actually achieving those savings in the last 2 years, and whether or not there's been any improvement this year in the recruitment of new social workers and retention of social workers? Thank you.
Any better? Thank you, mate. I'm looking at colleagues who are actually do this for a living in terms of recruiting and retaining social workers. We have had significant difficulty simply maintaining our headcount, our establishment of qualified social workers. That's true across adults as it is children's, and that's been the case for the last few years. And it's why a saving similar to this one has appeared a few times in budgets. So I don't know if anybody else wants to make a comment as to.
Sally, do you want to come and log in? Are these on, Alan?
So just in terms of recruitment and retention of social workers, in Sheffield at the minute we're only got a 3.5% turnover rate, which compared to rest of the country, we're doing quite well in our retention of social workers. But it's acknowledged that there's a national shortage of social workers, so a lot going on. So since in the last year, we've had various recruitment campaigns, including international recruitment. So what we're very aware of is that we are all fishing in the same pond, really, with the local authorities. So we started a campaign overseas, which has started very successfully, about bringing new social workers in. And in turn, what that is doing is reducing our reliance on agency social workers as well.
Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, can I just come back? So basically you're saying you're not doing anything specifically different from what we've been doing the last few years, so recruitment and looking elsewhere.
We've been... Sorry. We've done lots of changes to our recruitment campaign. We've really upped our online activity in terms of the recruitment, and the International Social Work campaign is a new campaign. Our first cohort came in January this year. In addition, we've listened to what the social work workforce have said, and in terms of the support workers to support their daily activities, just to make the work easier and more attractive in Sheffield. And we've also enhanced us links with Sheffield Hallam, Sheffield University, about the training opportunities. And so listening to what social workers are saying that they want in an employer of choice, and really pushing on achieving that.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Murphy?
I'm not happy, Chair, but it's an answer, I suppose. There is some work that I feel particularly needs to be done, and we need to look at caseload numbers, and we need to look at not just salaries, but what other benefits that we can provide for social workers, particularly with large case loads and long hours and out of hours services as well. But yeah, I think just looking at those three areas isn't good enough. As a major city with the complex needs a lot of the families and children present with today, I think we need to do a lot of other work with other agencies and partners to actually support social workers in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally, do you want to come back on that? And then Councillor Rooney.
So, answer I gave was specifically in terms of recruitment and retention, in terms of the bigger piece of work that we're doing about, I think, partnership work and development of services and supporting. We've had a lot of activity in the last 12 months about what that support looks like and what specialised areas of social work looks like, and really working with our workforce's strengths. In terms of caseloads, they're monitored on a weekly basis in a workforce meeting, and I have oversight on a monthly basis at least, but in a formal arena in the Director's Performance Clinic, just ensuring we've got that really clear oversight about manageable caseloads. And so that's part of our day-to-day activity to ensure that that's in place. We're also undertaking a large piece of work with HR, but with partners across the city, looking at what benefits are for people working in Sheffield, and that's not just for social workers, it's looking at what salary stretch options they are, what things that they are in Sheffield which make people's salary go further in terms of other benefits which I don't think are widely publicised.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Lee, did you want to ask something on this? I'm just mindful Councillor Rooney just wants to follow on that. And you had your hand up. So is it on the social work element or? Whichever.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I mean it's suggestion in terms of a future agenda item really, because this is it's a major issue, not just in terms of the budgetary situation, but it's one that we need to discuss, I think, for the benefit of not only the children but the adults in the city that need social work support. So I'm suggesting that if the next time we meet, that we actually have an agenda item on this specific issue, rather than discuss it across the chamber in terms of question and answer, because I think it's much more important than ping-ponging across the council chamber. It's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Rooney. I'll bring Councillor Lee in, but just on that, we have, we agreed way back when that we could have working groups on things like that, that we could bring a report back. So if it is a particular interest that committee members are interested in, we could set up a small working group to look at that and then just bring it back as a report to the committee. As Councillor Rooney said, rather than ping-ponging questions around in a committee. But I'm happy to, we've got that minuted and we'll follow that up before next meeting, if that's all right. Councillor Lee.
Well, just to comment on that one, it just seems to me that it's a bit like the Aldine House one in a way. There are only X number of social workers in South Yorkshire, and there's a pool, and every authority is buying to get those social workers to come and work for them. So when we put a proposal forward to say we'll make a saving because we'll recruit more social workers, or we won't, it just seems to me that it's not realistic, because they're not there necessarily, unless we're going to be offering more incentives than Doncaster or Rotherham or whatever. So I just think we do need to understand and be realistic about it. That's what what I was going to comment on. But my question, and I'm new to this committee. I didn't do children's strategy committee many years ago, so children's services are not that familiar to me. But I'm just wondering about the BIP that we didn't reach on the business support staff, and that's linked to support workers and field work staff. Is that, when we say those support workers and field work, is that social workers or is that other staff? So that's the first question. Are we referring to social workers? And why can't we make the savings on business support staff? Because we're not able to recruit other staff, the fieldwork staff. That was the question. I don't understand. I really don't. I just don't understand that.
Who would be best answering that? Would that be Sally? Ryan? Right, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks. So the idea was that you recruit a small number of more specialist staff and are able to release a relatively large number of business support staff. It was a swap. And in doing so, you achieve a saving.
Okay. I'm not sure what the business support staff are doing that then allows more frontline staff to do the work. But
that's when it, I'm afraid, gets beyond my knowledge of the detail of the work they were actually doing, I'm afraid. But
I don't know if anybody can answer that question.
So as part of this, what we did is looked at a lot of business support tasks, but also the improvements that we've had in IT and the support for people to be able to undertake their own tasks without needing business support to do this. But also some of the tasks which were quite time consuming around providing practical support to families, not time consuming in the support that were there, but things like travel time across the city. And so as we've worked with our social workers and our teams about what is the most effective use of time, and also our business support colleagues, that's when we've worked it down that by having the specialist staff, which are the support workers, to support the day-to-day practice of social workers, that reduces the need of business support, but very much alongside some of the improvements that we've got in terms of our IT systems over the last 12 months as well.
So our support staff, are they people that go out there and meet the client?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll work alongside social workers.
So like a social work assistant, if you like.
In old-fashioned terms, that's what they were, yeah.
Okay, then. Okay, I'm still I don't quite understand why you can't reduce the business support staff. But I'll leave it at that one. And the second question was about the rate of sickness in our children's homes. What we're doing about the rate of sickness, and why is it high? I take it's high because it is high because it's here in this paper.
Our rate of sickness is high in our children's homes. We're working very closely with HR and about our MAP support, so about that ongoing support for our workers and supporting people to be able to return to work where appropriate. I think it is really clear that being a residential worker in a children's home is an incredibly challenging environment, and about making sure that we have that additional support in place wherever we can. We've also been an ongoing recruitment programme to make sure that we've got enough permanent members of staff in post, and that's from the management all the way through. And so, although our sickness is still high, we are having improvements now that we're now getting the right people in post to be able. It's important to be able to build that team, that you've got a manager that's pulling everything together. So we've done a lot of work and we've got a continuous improvement plan there. So it is high, and we are meeting regularly, not only with HR but with the members of staff, about how we can support that return to work.
When you say it's high compared to other services within children's services, it's particularly high.
It's higher than other areas in children's services in our residential, and I think it has been just ongoing about the need for the right level of recruitment as well in our residential. That's an ongoing.
Jack, could we have a report on the sickness levels across the service?
Yep.
At a future meeting?
Yep.
And the actions that we're taking to reduce that sickness, and how much it's costing us in agency staff to backfill those positions.
Yep, we can do that. Yep, do you want that for the next meeting in November? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, could I just answer one final point?
You can.
That's okay. Just in terms of the original point about the social workers and savings and about the previous budgets, I think it's just important to note that since the start of September, Sheffield and all surrounding local authorities have signed up to a memorandum of understanding, and that's in terms of the inflated rates of agency social work salaries, because you're right that social workers could move from one authority to another. But as a region, we've all now signed up. The ADCS, which oversees nationally the Director of Children's Services, are seeking for that to be a national memorandum of understanding, so people can't just move a little bit further afield for different rates of pay. So that is being addressed regionally and is on the national agenda to try and achieve some stability for other authorities in a similar position.
Thank you, Sally. Are there any other questions on this report? Councillor Hawkshaw.
Thank you. I suppose it's a question for Sally, based upon what you said earlier, which is about you said there was a cohort in January that was taken on, and that's from overseas recruitment, I think that was. So is there a good success rate, and is there also a good retention rate for that source of qualified social workers?
It's been very successful so far. In fact, yesterday I was speaking to our first cohort who've obviously coming to Sheffield. It's been a lot of learning just about coming to a new city, but understanding how Sheffield works, how we work as a council, and they've successfully got through this first period, and really, really positive. So what we've been able to do with our first cohort is really learn what we need to do next. So we are on our second and looking towards a third cohort. So we are developing what the offer is, we're learning what the offer is, and we are getting some really positive feedback. And that's not only from the workers, but from the colleagues and also from children and families that they're working with.
Thank you. Any more comments on this report? No? So the committee have been asked to note the council's challenging financial position at the end of July 2022 as a recommendation. Are we all in agreement? Yep. So we're all agreed. Thank you very much. On to agenda item number 10, which is the special free school bid. Thank you, Sally, for that. The special free school bid to support special educational needs and disability sufficiency. And this report is being presented by Matthew Pears, Strategic Commissioning Manager. Matthew, this will be found on page 21 in your supplementary pack. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly provide an overview of the paper, then open it for questions, if that's okay. So the proposal that we're bringing to committee today is we're seeking approval to submit a bid for a new special free school. We're coming to committee as establishing new schools is a reserved function for this committee under the Council Constitution. So we have an opportunity through the national free school process to bid for a new special school and access national capital funds through the Department for Education. Our proposal is to submit a bid for a 200-place special school across key stages 2 to 4 jointly with Barnsley Council, meeting needs in relation to autism spectrum condition. If we're successful, we're anticipating a 2027 or 2028 opening date. Just briefly in terms of the rationale for this bid, which is it's in the paper anyway, but just very briefly, sufficiency. So in terms of our areas of need that we've got around special educational needs, autism is our highest area of need, and it's the need that's causing our highest pressure on school places. We are forecasting continued growth and pressure on special school places over the coming 5 years. And we feel that developing an additional special school will help us avoid higher cost independent placements, which are obviously contributing to our financial pressures. Just in terms of why we're looking at a joint bid, so firstly, perhaps most importantly, we see it as increasing our chances of success. So from the DFE's perspective, there is an expectation that local authorities will work together on this. The first question on the application basically says, if you're not submitting a joint bid, why aren't you submitting a joint bid? Secondly, Barnsley are looking at the same area of need that we're looking at in terms of autism. A joint bid also reduces some of the financial pressure on Sheffield if we're successful. And just briefly, in the last fortnight or so, there's been briefings taking place on the Barnsley side of this, which have indicated strong support for a joint bid. And then just lastly, in terms of the rationale points, accessing capital. So the level of capital funding that is needed to develop a new school is only possible through this process. We don't have the local funds available to do that. So just in summary, we're proposing to submit a bid for the 21st of October deadline. The outcome should be known around Christmas. We are planning to bring to committee the wider sufficiency plan for special educational needs, which this forms a part of. And there is a separate process in 2023, if we're successful, to appoint an academy sponsor for the school. And I anticipate at that point, that's when we get into more detail about, the day-to-day working of the school, how it would look like for the children, 9 to 4, that kind of thing. But I'll stop there and open for any questions. Thank you.
Andrew, if you'd like to come in.
If I may just to add a little bit of background information for the committee. So it's styled as a free school because legislative in law, all new schools must open as academies. So as well as whether we've got sufficient funding, all new schools have to open as academies. And the name that's given to an academy that's open from new is a free school. So it's a free school up until the point to which it opens, then it becomes an academy. So it will have to open as part of an academy trust and the selection process. So first of all, we're bidding to be allowed to open it, and then there'll be further processes to actually select the academy trust to which the school will then belong. But we're not allowed anymore to maintain schools. The piece of legislation is called the free school presumption.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really helpful. Do any members have any questions on this recommendation? Councillor Rooney.
Well, it's not a question. It's just it would be nice if we actually succeeded, wouldn't it? I mean, we've had a discussion prior to this about the dire situation that we find ourselves in terms of the budget. A little bit of good news wouldn't go amiss, would it?
Thank you, Councillor Rooney. I'm going to move on then. This report has been given to us. The recommendation is that, do you want to just explain the recommendation again so that members are aware of what we're voting for, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Just in terms of the recommendations, so we're recommending to submit a joint bid with Barnsley Council. If for any reason a joint bid falls through ahead of the deadline, we don't think it will at this point, but if it does, we would submit a Sheffield only bid instead. We're asking for the committee to endorse the principle of funding any abnormal capital site costs from our high needs capital allocation, and probably just to add, we're confident that we can fund that from that allocation that we've already got, and that we'll bring a further report on special needs sufficiency more broadly to a later committee. And I think that's put in for December at the moment.
Thank you, Matthew. So based on the recommendations that Matthew has just put forward, are we all in agreement to support the recommendation? Thank you very much. All agreed. Thank you. We're moving along nicely here, aren't we? Okay. Item number 11 is the medical needs policy, which is page 40 of the agenda pack. And today we've got the presenting officer is Tim Armstrong, Head of Access and Inclusion. Tim, over to you.
Morning, thank you. Morning, afternoon, evening. There we go. So the paper that's coming today is to ask for approval of a policy statement for ensuring a good education for children who can't attend school because of health needs. So we have a statutory duty to have a policy in place. We don't currently have an up-to-date, accurate policy in place to work from. And so we're seeking that's approved today, and because it's a statutory requirement, that's why it's come through, and a policy why it's come through to yourselves. I want to just give a little bit of context and link it back to a couple of other things, including a piece of work on the forward plan. So you'll remember and see from the minutes of last time that we had approval and agreement from yourselves with our commissioning colleagues on commissioning provision at Chapel House, part of Beckton School for children who are medically too ill to attend school. And at that time you asked for a broader conversation about the breadth of social, emotional, mental health needs that there are across the city, which is on the forward plan for developing. We are almost going a bit in reverse on this, and I'm very mindful of that, and you will also be very mindful of that. But essentially we had a duty in June to recommission the provision that we had, which is why that came at that point. We've got no current active policy from within which to work, so we're currently having some challenges and dilemmas in terms of making sure that we can say to schools, this is the policy, this is how it has to work. And then there is a much broader conversation for you as a committee to have, and as part of a broader commissioning approach around emotional well-being in the city. The policy is very specific, and it's specifically about how we as a local authority will arrange and meet our statutory duties to arrange provision for children who, due to clearly identified medical needs, are unable to access a school place for more than 15 days in an academic year. And so we need this in place in order to operate effectively. As we go forward with any broader discussion around the direction of travel in the city, the policy can be amended in line with any discussions that come later. Just to give a summary of what's within the policy, as I said, it's part of our statutory duties to, as a local authority, arrange provision for children and young people who are unable to attend due to medical needs. And so we've been quite clear, and it's in point 1.1 in the policy, that this summary is in line with national guidance, and we are ensuring that all reasonable measures are put in place prior to the local authority arranging provision for children who can't attend because of health needs, that the children's school continues to be required to fund provision put in place for them, that children and their families should expect a joined-up plan of support, that decision-making on provision and support should be formalised through the local authority in line with the statutory duties to arrange, that the local authority will commission appropriate provision to support children who cannot attend school because of health needs, and that's the Chapel House provision at this time, that the inclusion and attendance team will oversee appropriate cases, and that any arranged provision should be short-term, regularly reviewed and delivered alongside appropriate medical interventions. So what I'm seeking for today is essentially a decision as to whether the committee is happy with the policy, and that being a published position, policy statement for us as a local authority to work to in regard to our statutory duties. As I said, there is a broader conversation about the whole breadth of support around emotional health well-being that you've asked for, that's on the on the work plan, and that will come forward from appropriate officers for discussion at the right time.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Rooney.
Yeah, might seem like a slightly odd question, but when you put together a report like this and you put it in front of us, is it checked with those that write the legislation that it is actually compliant with the guidance? Because you're asking us in this room to basically endorse the fact that it is compliant with national legislation, and with the best will in the world, we probably wouldn't know that unless you tell me it was. So what I'm asking is, do you ask the legislators whether or not that is the case?
So we don't specifically ask the legislators, because that's the Department for Education and central government, but we have statutory guidance that tells us what has to be within the policy. So it's written against that, and then as part of bringing the paper and the policy, we consult with our legal colleagues to ensure that it's compliant. So ultimately, yes, we are, but we don't consult the legislators directly. We consult our legal colleagues to ensure that we're compliant with it.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions on this paper? No? So the recommendation... Oh, Councillor Holmeshaw, sorry.
It's more of an observation, actually, and I do like the way that this has been laid out in terms of there are certain very key things which are being addressed here. So, relationship to Sheffield Children's Hospital, teenage pregnancy, tutoring, and a named mental health champion as well. So all these are absolutely key to the way we run our services in Sheffield. So I think that's to be applauded.
Thank you, Councillor Holmeshaw. So the recommendation is that the committee are asked to approve the proposed policy statement. Are we all in agreement? No dissent? Can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. All agreed. Thank you. Item number 12. Adoption Service Annual Reports. Presented by Sally. And I think we've got the Fostering Annual Report as item 13. That's you as well, it's Sally, isn't it? So start with number 12, thank you.
Sorry, I've just
That's all right.
frozen. So in terms of the Fostering Service Annual Report, it is quite a lengthy report that you've all had sight of. But just to give you an overview, so the purpose of the report is to show performance for 2021, and that's the activity since Sheffield's been part of the Regional Adoption Agency, and the developments that have occurred over the last 12 months. So in context, the South Yorkshire Regional Adoption Agency was 13th agency to be created in this country, and it brings together adoption services in Doncaster City Council, which in this report was Doncaster Children's Trust, but has since moved back to the council in September this year. Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council, Sheffield Council and Barnsley. And host authority for this agency is Doncaster Council. So we set as targets in the adoption report, and so in 21-22 it were 92 adopters, but we had a decline in performance, and some of that is around the financial pressures on families, and we know what the impact of COVID has been nationwide about people changing priorities, and there's been a national decline in potential adoptions. We've also had some challenges about recruiting adopters to meet specific needs of children and families, particularly children who could provide a home for older children, sibling groups, children with complex health needs, and we understand that the diversity of our potential adopters does not match the diversity of our children and young people. So we're working with our, as part of what's been happening over this period of time, working with national and local campaigners for those particular groups, and doing more targeted recruitment. So in terms of some of our performance, target data, so our national A1 indicator, for length of time between a child coming into care and being placed with an adopted family. The target is 426. The average for the Regional Adoption Agency is 528, and this is really influenced by the time it takes to find suitable families for older children, which impacts on the average overall. In terms of the National Indicator Average for Placement Order to Matching, which is an A2 indicator, target is 121 days, and for the Regional Adoption Agency that was 190 days. Again, they're the same issues that are causing delays around our older children and children with more complex needs. We had a reduction across all local authorities, as I've said, in the adoption activities, and that is reflective across England and Wales. Some of the issues with the length of time for children to be adopted and adoptions concluding has been related to COVID and court delays. When we've got children that are matched and that are in a safe place, they're not a priority in the family court system, and it will be emergencies. But what we can see, which is outside of this report, is that process is speeding up again now. So key aim of the agency is about placing South Yorkshire children with South Yorkshire families. What we can see is that we're having more success in keeping children and young people locally. And in terms of development, we've had lots of success with adoption support and providing that specialist support for adoption families. But in terms of his future plans for this year, as it is now, it's about looking at what any surplus of cash, because all authorities put their own funds in to fund the agency for specialist adoption support, and about a specialist psychologist to support the sub-region. There's been, as well as the developments and future plans, a real improvement in the direct and indirect contact, including things like letterbox contact between birth families and adopters, which is quite significant moving forward for our children and young people.
Thank you, Sally. Has anyone got any questions on the annual report? So can we note the report that we've... Oh, Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Sally, could we just have a bit of an update, perhaps from Councillor Ross and Councillor Rooney, about the meeting with the adoption parents who I think you met with earlier this year, is that correct? From a meeting when they came to our scrutiny committee. Could we have a brief update on how that went and how people were finding the new way of working? It might not be appropriate for now, but for me, as being part of that scrutiny, it feels like we've just sort of fallen off the edge of that cliff and haven't had an update really about how the adoptee parents were finding the new arrangements.
I think I'll bring Councillor Ross in, but I think what might be a good idea is, because where we've changed our systems, so where we've gone from cabinet and scrutiny committees to now a committee system, there will be legacy work that would have happened under the scrutiny system that maybe needs to be fed into the committee system. So I'm sure there will have been a report after you met. It would have been a piece of work that you've done. So if I could ask for that to be included in the notes from this meeting, the scrutiny report around that piece of work, would that be okay? Councillor Ross, do you want to just give us a verbal update?
Well, I'm going to throw this at Councillor Rooney, who's not actually met them, but the point was there was concern that good practice that was being generated in Sheffield wasn't going to be replicated when it went to the new organisation. And I think the meeting, and Sally or Mick can update it, provided reassurance on that, and I think the parents, prospective parents, were reassured by the meeting with the new organisation.
Yeah, it was a meeting that took place under Chatham House rules, basically, where we exchanged some firm and frank opinions as to what the relationship was. Paul Dempsey was the officer that was there at the time, and unfortunately Paul has left us, which is a pity because he was good at his job. You tested my memory, Councillor Murphy, because it's quite some time ago, but I do believe that it's in the legacy list from the Scrutiny Committee to come back to the issue. I am again, because I know a couple of the people personally that were at the meeting, and I do have regular correspondence with them, that I think they are fairly happy that things have improved in terms of the relationship, and they were reassured by the assurance that was given by the representative from Adoption South Yorkshire that the best practice of Sheffield would be one that would be applied across the new organisation. That was the biggest concern, I believe, that they had at the time, that the good things that Sheffield brought to the table would be lost in the merger. So without going into a great deal of detail about the actual conversations that took place, I think that what we've got is an understanding that if there are issues that the adopters need to raise, that there is a mechanism for doing so now, rather than perhaps ending up with a conversation across the council chamber again. And these sorts of conversations and meetings have their place, but I'm not sure that they're the ideal medium for dealing with what are often quite sensitive and personal issues. So I hope that my reassurance that the meeting took place, it was a meaningful one, and that we have an understanding that when issues need to be raised, there is a mechanism for doing that. I hope that that sort of satisfies Anne's question.
Thank you, Mick. Is that all right, Anne?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Rooney. Could I just suggest that we do have an update put as part of our meetings in this committee, that we do have an opportunity to have an update from some of those adoptee parents, that things are going in the right direction and they are happy and satisfied with the new procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garbutt.
That was going to be exactly my suggestion, that we invite them to some sort of meeting with us, maybe in a meeting like this, but because of the sensitivities, it might be better not to have it in a public meeting, so that we could hear whether or not they have any feedback, whether it's positive or negative, etc. I think committees were set up with the intention of engaging with the people affected by our decisions. So I think this would be a really good way of going about it.
Thank you. We will look at doing that as a small working group maybe, and if any of members on the committee want to put themselves forward to, because I don't think any of the adopted families would like to sit with 9 of us. I think it just could be propose just a couple of us or a small group maybe. Mick and then...
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest that they choose. It's as simple as that. Whatever suits them is the method that we should use.
Yeah, and they might not want to, but we'll ask. Yeah. Councillor Holmeshaw.
I think what strikes me reading through the report is the section towards the end. We've got developments and improvements anticipated towards 2022-23, and there's a number of rather progressive, positive suggestions made to approach fostering. For example, more face-to-face recruitment events. I think that's going to be a good way forward, and we may be talking about that a little later.
Thank you, Councillor Holmeshaw. Can we now go on to item 13, which is the Fostering Service Annual Report? That's you again, Sally.
So again, I'll just do a summary of the Fostering Service Annual Report. So this is the 21-22 report. And as of 31st of March 2022, Sheffield City Council cared for 666 looked after children, and that was a slight decrease from the snapshot point the previous year when 674 children were placed in care. Of these children, 71% benefited from family-based care, which is foster care provision, which is a rise from the previous year. And of those 473, 70%, so that's 332 children were placed in our in-house children, with 101 children placed with independent fostering provision, known as IFAs. We had further 332 children placed with our mainstream and kinship care arrangements. 86 were kinship, and I think what's really significant is work that's done there about keeping children within their natural family networks. In addition, the fostering service also provides short break care for disabled children and support care interventions for families on the edge of care, and that includes adoptive families and special guardianships. And so in 21-22, the service provided regular support for 80 children in 69 families, which again were beginning to increase after the difficulties of providing that provision during the COVID period. In terms of our placement stability, that's improved, the short-term stability in our care, and the number of children who experience 3 or more placement moves dropped from 12% to just under 11%. However, the longer-term stability has dipped slightly, and the percentage of children in the current placements for more than 2 years has reduced from 72% to 70%. So alongside that, the fostering service have been providing additional support, not only when children experience placement moves, but also about a team around the placement to support placement stability before there is a need for any move. And part of that is stability and resilience through therapeutic support and interventions, so having our own in-house psychologists and speech and language therapists to support our fostering service. We launched in the 2021, we launched our first Mockingbird constellation, which has been fed back as being incredibly supportive and building up, in essence, a family network for our fostering families. And our second constellation was due to start in this report period, but started just afterwards. As recruitment and retention of foster carers is an absolute priority, and we've looked at different incentives and continued to review. And in this period, we looked at the wraparound support that I've mentioned before for Sheffield carers, and schemes such as refer a friend schemes that have a financial incentive attached. So as target in this year was to approve 40 new mainstream foster carers. We didn't achieve this target, with 20 mainstream foster carers being approved, which were a 6 family drop from the previous year. But in addition, we did approve 21 connected carers, and showing some of the difference in practice about ensuring we're working with families and supporting children to stay within their connected networks where possible. And continue to have an increased social media presence. But during this period, difficulty in recruitment and retention were lack of availability to move back to those face-to-face events and campaigns. So moving forward, what we've acknowledged is that there's an increase in complexity, and it's a nationwide issue about the level of needs for our children and young people, and we've got an increasing number of children aged over 10 years old needing a placement. So over the next 12 months, we're revisiting our recruitment and retention strategy, really going to that face-to-face approach to recruitment and retention, really looking at the resources in our connected carers team and an expansion of this service to make sure that in a timely manner we can keep children safe within their families where it's appropriate to do so. We've got a review of our financial allowances and any incentives to go with the foster care package. And we're also promoting the fostering friendly employer status to enhance corporate parenting offer across the city, and that's looking at working arrangements, annual leave arrangements. And we've also got plans to try and engage local businesses in Sheffield in that, just to understand the demands of being a foster carer.
Thank you, Sally. Any questions from members on this report? Councillor Ross.
Yep, thank you for this. Thank you for the report. I'm actually looking forward because one of the main planks of our budget and savings is to recruit more foster carers. And we've got that we missed our target for 21-22. And it's really essential to underpin the whole budget that we do hit the target for 22-23 and 23-24. I know, and I've given you the opportunity for members of the public and put it on record, the different steps that you're taking forward. For example, at our local area committee meeting next week, the foster service is going to have a stand there and making opportunity of people who possibly have a commitment to sort of public engagement being there, going out to where there are shortages really in certain ethnic minority centres and so on. But do you want to just outline, the extra steps that were taken to try and ensure that we not only meet our foster target but exceed the foster target to make up for deficiencies in previous years?
So we're putting together a plan, not just for this financial year moving forward, about incredibly targeted support, and that is about conversational based recruitment and reaching out to people who might not have considered fostering or have seen adverts that we do have a big advertising present and thought it weren't relevant. So really developing those conversations, and that's going to be constant, and it is an ask that I've made of people before, of if people have got any awareness of community groups, anywhere that we could go, that we need to be talking to people, then we're open to offers. Alongside that, we've got a traditional recruitment campaign using social media, using advertising. We've just done a radio advert on Hallam FM, and at the start of last week we had 10 expressions of interest for new foster carers, which is at the most that we've had in some time in response to a campaign. So we've been quite consistent and making sure that there is those resources when people are interested to be able to progress that fostering approval process as well.
Do you want to come back, Councillor?
Thank you for that, and it's good news that sort of 10 hits, as it were, because I think sort of adverts on the back of the bus and things are okay, but never going to really shift it gear. Can I urge that if you do get an inquiry, that it's followed up absolutely immediately as top priority? I mean, the same day or next day at worst, because this is vital to our whole strategy. And if people sort of feel, oh, I've not heard anything for even 2 weeks, it doesn't sound like a very efficient service, perhaps I'll not get involved with that. So it's almost the #1 priority. As soon as we get a contact, be all over it.
Absolutely agree, and I think we've talked earlier today, and the Assistant Director responsible is quite clear. 24 hours is a maximum, and if we don't get contact in 24 hours, then we try and keep trying. And that goes throughout the assessment process as well, because we know it's a complex assessment, but about being able to make sure we can go back to people and say, I know you feel like it's taking time, but this is what we're doing. So people know that we're invested and that we haven't forgotten. And I think it's easy to feel like that if you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So real investment in that process as well.
Thank you. Councillor Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell us something about the diversity profile of the both of the children to be adopted and of the potential adopters that you have on your books? And does this have any effect on the way you go about recruiting and retaining adopters?
I can come back to you with those figures. I wouldn't want to try and hazard a guess at the current profiles. So if that's something that would be helpful for us to come back on the different profiles that we have, then I'm happy to do so. I think in terms of the recruitment of adopters and foster carers, we have a responsibility to be proactive to make sure that we're reaching all areas of Sheffield. And we look after children and young people from all communities in Sheffield, and we need to ensure that we can provide care in a similar way.
Thank you. Can I ask for that to be a written response in the minutes then to your question? Is that all right? Thank you. Any more questions on the fostering service annual report? Thank you. And can we show that this report is noted? Thank you. So agenda item 14 then is the SEND acceleration plan, and we've got officer representing this today is Kevin Strawn, and it's page 1 on supplementary pack 2. Hi Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report presented this afternoon is to give the committee an update on the progress made to improve transitions to adulthood for children and young people through the multi-agency SEND Accelerated Progress Plan, which is ongoing right now. It's worth having the context of where we are in terms of what brought us to it. In November 2018, Sheffield was subject to a local area SEND inspection by Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission. At that point in time, there were 7 significant areas of weakness identified by those inspection teams, and that resulted in a written statement of action with 7 clear directed points to drive improvement. The written statement action involved partners in education, health and care, working with children, young people and their families at that point. Ofsted revisited Sheffield in February 2022 to review the Council's progress against those 7 written statements of action. At the time of the inspection, we were very clear in our self-assessment report that we believe written statement of action number 7, which was multi-agency transitions, was not strong. Ofsted and the Care Commission agreed with us at that point in time. They found that we'd made sufficient progress across 6 of the written statements of action, but number 7, transitions, was indeed weak. So effectively at that point, we went from Ofsted intervention to Department for Education intervention and developed a accelerated progress plan. The Department for Education stated in their outcome letter that secure and effective multi-agency transition arrangements for children and young people with SEND is poor at post-16 and post-18 rather, and beyond. Information on transition is not readily and easily accessible for young people with SEND and their families. Little progress had been made to address this area of significant weakness. Just once again reiterate that we were aware of that when the inspection happened in February. We were required to develop an accelerated progress plan. That progress plan was developed during March and April of this year, and that was led by both ourselves, the local authority, and the CCG at that time, now the ICB. So we moved forward into the actual progress plan. We developed that in close partnership with the Parent Carer Forum and with a number of other partner organisations at the time. The progress plan was signed off by the Department for Education in May, and we moved forward into that activity rapidly to make sure that we were moving quickly and progressively forward through it. The action plan was broken down into a number of work streams, so that was some focus in those specific areas of weakness. The work streams are, and were at the time, planning for adulthood, post-16 opportunities, transition progress, co-production, communication and information, and workforce development. The accelerated action plan project team reports into the Inclusion Board, which I chair on behalf of Andrew. So there's governance at all levels across the board, ensuring that that the plan is making sufficient progress and it's checked regularly and effectively around the progress that we're achieving through the plan. We were recently visited by the DV for a monitoring inspection, and they found generally that sufficient progress up to that point in time has been made across all the work streams, and that we were on task and on programme to get it completed in time. Of course, there's a long way to go. In November, we have a more formal inspection by the DV, that we treat that as an Ofsted inspection, and they will come and really scrutinise and deep dive into all the activity that we're doing at that point in time to make sure that we're actually on track and making progress. But as it stands right now, the DV are satisfied with the progress we are making, as indeed we feel we're on target to achieve on time. It's worth noting there's been an awful lot of consultation in the build-up to both the APP and on the progress being made, working closely with the Parent Carer Forum and also particularly with young people who are actively involved in the planning and the decision-making and also the review of progress. So their voice is at the very heart of everything that we're doing with the Accelerated Progress Plan. So we're working now towards a November interim inspection by Ofsted and the Care Commission, which we know will be very demanding and very focused. But at this point in time, we're very confident that we made suitable progress and we're on target to achieve that at that point in time. And of course, to really complete this within the year that we've had to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we have questions from members on this report? Councillor Ross and then Councillor Rooney.
Thank you. Just want to seek reassurance on actually page 3 of the supplementary report, item 1.1.3, and specifically independent living. This is going back a few years, but I still bear the scars of casework where a 16-year-old was given the keys to a maisonette without any support at all, with the inevitable peer pressure, mayhem, and consequent impact on the neighbourhood. Reassurance that we now have a much better system of supporting people independent living than just giving them the keys and saying, get on with it. And can you outline what support is given to the independent living?
I do believe it's improved considerably. There's a lot of activity going on in developing education strands to enable these young people to understand the responsibilities of rental and the responsibilities and maturity required to live on their own. So we've got multiple strands of education going on. A course was run this summer, a chief training called the Golden Key, and that was all about that kind of activity to make sure that they were prepared and ready for independent living, tenancy and the maturity required. So there is work going on in that space, and that first, particularly that first course, it really emphasised what they needed to learn, but we were particularly pleased with the feedback because the young people who were involved in it certainly fed back that they were gaining the skills and understanding they needed.
So, at what age might a young person be given the keys to their own property, and what specific support is still available to them as they start to manage and possibly encounter difficulties with managing budget, cooking, etc. and things? We anticipate nobody moving into any sort of independent living until they will have an age and maturity to do so. So we expect that to be around 18, although we do have 16 and 17-year-olds progressing in that direction. There is support ongoing, and I need to get back to you on what that looks like. It sits outside of my personal remit.
Thank you. Councillor Rooney.
Yeah, it's a follow-on from what Colin has just said. There was a national pot of money called Supporting People at one time, which I think is now subsumed into the general budget, council budget. But as part of that pot of money, that we used to have specific contracts where people were helped on a day, they might get a daily visit or a weekly visit or whatever it might be, to make sure that they were coping in precisely the sorts of situations that Colin has just described. And I'm just wondering, do those contracts still exist? I should probably know the answer to that myself, really. So that's one question. I'm just wondering if you could explain the change of inspection regimes, why that occurred. It's CQC to Ofsted, CQC to Department of Education, I believe. And I'm just wondering if you could explain why that is the case. And the other is to ask for reassurance that while we're concentrating on number 7, that numbers 1 to 6 don't get neglected. So I'm not suggesting for one instant that is the case, but I just want somebody to tell me that they're not. Okay, thanks, Chair.
The first question, I'm afraid I can't answer again. It's outside my remit. It's with the Director of Children and Families, but I can come back to you. I know I've heard that there isn't as much funding in that space, and that support isn't as effective as it had been in the past. With regards to the inspection, we moved from Ofsted and the Care Commission to the DfE because of the progress being made and the simple fact that there was one area that required additional work, and that it's a natural and simple change. Perhaps Andrew can further fill us in on that.
So it's just the legislative framework that exists around the accountabilities around it. So the initial inspection in 2018 was subject to Ofsted and CQC because that's where the accountability sits. The visit this year was a revisit on the 2018 inspection, and you're right, Councillor Rooney, to highlight that there were 7 areas, and this is one that was deemed still to be inadequate and requiring further progress. But overall, in terms of the overall pattern of that revisit, sufficient progress had been made to release it from Ofsted. It's currently being monitored rather than inspected by the DfE, and once we complete this cycle, it will then become subject to a future inspection by Ofsted and the CQC in the future, probably on a new framework.
Are we all right with that?
If we could do a little bit of digging into the supporting, what was the support, I think, I'm looking at Colin again, that's what it was called, wasn't it, Supporting People? And we did have the contract. Well, you threw one at me earlier, Colin, so I'm throwing one back across the room at you.
I'm sure you've got the right term there, Councillor Rooney.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ross, that's very reassuring. If we could just do a bit of digging in terms of where we are with that sort of contract, please. Just for information and to sort out whether I'm right or completely off the mark.
Thank you. I'll bring Kevin back in, but I do recall the Supporting People, and I think it's called something completely different now, and it's kind of moved on and has a different, it's been merged into other things. I think just before Kevin comes in, I think from my perspective on this, over the years we have identified that there is an issue around transitions from childhood to adulthood, particularly for young people with any special educational need or disability. And while it is highly stressful for families, it shouldn't be. We know that we've got young people that are accessing our services that are going to become adults. So this is kind of refreshing that we're looking in on it. I know we've had conversations about it for a while. And I would assume that, I would hope that we're not shifting young people out into independent living if they're not ready. So I'm hoping it's on a case-by-case piece of work with each individual, and they could be anything up to the age of 25, I suppose, before they became independent. So Kevin, if you could just respond, and then Councillor Lee.
I've just been informed by my colleague sat behind me that there's a briefing tomorrow which will cover part of that aspect of independent living. So we don't need to delve too deeply, Councillor Rooney, it's there tomorrow.
It's just very reassuring that I'm not going to do lally, that's all.
with regard, point number 3, and it's a very valid question to ask about, are we keeping our eye on the other areas that we were inspected on originally in 2018 and then re-inspected in 2022? The simple answer is yes. We're very determined that we make progress on the integrated transition, and that we naturally make that necessary progress, but that we don't take our eye off the ball. We monitor that every month through the SLT, and we also monitor it through our Director's Performance Clinic, where we're constantly checking on data and being aware of what's happened. And just yesterday, I got informed that there was some slippage in certain areas, so I met with the head of SEND, and we're looking at how we drive that forward again. So an awful lot of work going on to make sure that what would have been, but there's no longer, the 7 issues are still being focused on and concentrated on continually.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Can I, just for my information, a lot of these young people will be living with their own families, and some will choose to stay with families for an indefinite period and might not want to live independently, but they will be living at home. No one's encouraging, well, no one's forcing people to become independent. It's their choice and their families, in discussion with their families, but where they do want to make that move to independent living, we will be there to support them to do that. That's what generally happens. And those young people will not necessarily be eligible for care and support from adult services, will they? They won't meet that criteria. Is that right? Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I think we've got a multi-stranded approach to this. We understand that some young people will indeed be able and prepared to go out and make their own way in life, and we have a pathway model that allows us to develop them in that direction. Some will indeed stay at home. And again, we're not missing the opportunity to prepare them for life if that is what they choose to do and their families choose for them. So we've got a lot of work going in to look at how life can be made more purposeful for them, even if they are cared for at home by their parents or indeed in adult social care ultimately. So it's all about, every strand of this work is about making sure that that young person, when they develop into adulthood, has a meaningful life that self-actualises at the level they're capable of self-actualising. And we shouldn't forget, many of them are capable of getting jobs and going out to work and being highly successful. So it's making sure that we understand the pathway they're on and what the impact of the learning that they're involved in and what that destination needs to look like. So it is well planned and stepped in that direction.
So I suppose that support to make that transition to independent living is fine, and if you want to stay with your family is fine, but at some point, post-25, they're not eligible for any support from services, is that right? Do they continue to get support if you're not eligible for care and support in terms of the social care criteria for that kind of level of care and support?
Once they get past 25, the world changes. They then become an adult in the truest sense. Their education, health and care plan finishes. Many educational health and care plans finish earlier than that. It all depends upon the maturity and where learning ends and that kind of thing. But I'm afraid you're absolutely right. There is a point when all of that kind of support comes to an end. And then the Department for Work and Pensions Job Centre Plus pick up that kind of support for young adults with disabilities and difficulties and support them at that point. We're looking at how we work more productively with JCP and DWP to make sure that we're preparing the young people who are heading that direction for that engagement. So we've got DWP and JCP coming in to meet the young people, both at the likes of Sheffield and at Sheffield College, to make sure that they're prepared for that intervention and the other sort of support they can get in life as adults with disabilities.
Yeah, because it seems to me that it's absolutely crucial that if we want people who are after the age of 25 to live successfully and without issues in the community, because sooner or later families go, you know, as people get older, and we need to ensure they've got the confidence and the skills and I suppose employment is one way of maintaining and increasing the skills to be able to live independently, not just because it gives you some financial support, but you develop the networks, hopefully, and the confidence from that kind of activity, just as at school you develop confidence, hopefully. Because I just worry about those adults post-25 who are heading off into the world without lacking some of the opportunities that most of us have experienced in our lives.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. There's huge disadvantage in that with that group. What we are concentrating on right now is engaging with employers to look more productively and actively at how we can encourage job carving, so that no matter what level of disability a person has, we can identify a set of strengths and skills that they have that they can actually get a job. And recently we had about 35 employees meet with us, and we brought in an academic from Leeds University who talked to them about job carving and that sort of skill of looking for the best in another human being, identifying skills and strengths, and really recognising that young people with disabilities can bring an awful lot to the workplace, providing we limit the job that they have to do and we capitalise on their strengths and not lead them into weakness. And I was very, very surprised by the level of interest and support from the employers. And all of them, the young people, designed a pledge, which they asked the employers to sign up to, and all the employers signed up to a pledge, and they've all been followed up. And we're going to do that event 5 times during this academic year with different sets of employers from across the city and across the region. I firmly believe that an awful lot of young people that we send back to families or head off into supported living are capable of working, providing we can find them an employer with the right levels of empathy and the understanding that if you carve the job and employ 3 people in what would be one person's job, you end up with 3 specific and special skill sets that can do that job. We're proving it right now with Chief, where we've got three adults who work for the council, who we've brought into Chief, who had a terrible time during COVID. We've carved jobs up, we've found their specialisms, and they're working highly successfully in that special needs centre and presenting themselves as highly effective role models right now for the young people who are there. We're working with Sheffield College to make sure that the college, who are the biggest provider along with us in the city, are working on that sort of agenda too, and they very much embrace this. So we're quite hopeful that we're moving in the right direction. But I can't pretend we've got all the solutions for sure. We're just being very, very deliberate in asking the workforce, the workplace, to work with us in a different way for these young people. Because work ultimately is where they need to be, and that would give them the best chance of independence, the opportunity to earn money, and through work develop wider skills which improve their employability across the board.
Thank you, Kevin. Any more questions from anyone? No? So the recommendation for this report is that the committee note the content of the report and that the committee note the progress made to date to improve the council's approach to supporting young people to adulthood and the next steps for this work. Are we all in agreement? Oops, sun's in my eyes now, I can't see. Yeah. Okay, yep, thank you very much. Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so now we are going back to item number 8, which is the, oh gosh, beg your pardon, I've got it right in front of me, it's the budget report. So we will just take some advice. The first part of this budget report, I understand, can be done in open session, and Appendix 1 will be in a closed session. Just to confirm that that's right. Yep, Mark, would you like to take a step forward? Thank you very much. And if you could just go through the public report, please, and then let me know when we're ready to move on to the next, the closed appendix. Then we can end the webcast and go into closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we will...
Sorry, Mark, before we start, Chair, can you just direct me to the page number that we need to start from, please?
It's agenda item 8, page 7.
8-7, thank you.
Is that Can we see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did it come separate? Can somebody just help Councillor
Thank you.
Murphy? Thank you. Has everyone got sight of it? Can you all see it? Sorry, Councillor Whittaker? Do you just want to let Alan know if you've not got the paper, and we'll start when everyone's got it.
The confusing bit is in the restricted papers, it's got the budget papers, that agenda 5 on top. So if you look under the minutes of the last meeting, it's under there.
Are we all ready then? Okay, Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So what I will do is I will just want to draw, pick a few highlights from the paper, and then I think once we've done that, probably close the discussion and just go into the appendix. So I will start with page 4 of the report, section 1.1, to just remind the committee of the background. The expectation from Strategy and Resources Committees is that this committee will have a standstill budget for 23-24. What that means is that if there are additional funding requirement over and above the current financial year, the committee will have to find proposals, mitigations, with a view that the balanced budget proposal is put forward to Strategy and Resource Committee. Under section 1.2, this committee oversees work which is carried out by 3 areas: children and families, which is mainly the children's social care, integrated commissioning, and education and skills. And there are a number of tables which capture the pressure that are across those service areas. Table A captures the overall pressure, which equates to around £18 million. So on a cash standstill basis, the committee needs to find £18 million worth of saving or mitigation proposal to balance the budget next year. Table B captures the biggest service area, children and families, children's social care, with £11 million worth of pressures for next year. The breakdown is there. I won't go through the breakdown at this moment. However, I do want to draw your attention that at this stage, we are not making any provision for cost of living increase. We expect that once the cost of living crisis starts to hit, there would be an increase in demand for social care. It is difficult to predict what that level would be. So at this moment of time, we have assumed that the current level of demand will continue, and we will have to deal with that as an exceptional situation when it starts to manifest itself in terms of demand. Moving over to page 6, I think we had earlier discussion about Aldine House. We know that we cannot deliver Aldine House in the current financial year or next financial year. The cost to build Aldine is in the region of 35 to 40 million pounds, and what we are suggesting is we pursue that only if external funding could be secured by the government. If the government do not provide external funding for Aldine House, it is no longer viable to build a second secure unit with a £2 million potential saving at this point in time. Moving down, table C captures the pressure for integrated commissioning, which adds up to £422,000 for next year. Education and skill, these are statutory services which need to be funded from general fund. They equate to around £1 million, and then overall DSG, dedicated school grant, related pressure of £5.6 million. Another critical consideration I want to draw your attention is the pressure on schools in terms of utilities and energy. the current estimates are this would be an additional cost in the region of £13.5 million to the school system. Our expectation is that the school system will have to absorb that pressure. However, I just wanted to highlight that as a pressure because there are a number of maintenance schools, and if the schools struggle to balance their budget, that's an area that the committee will have to keep under consideration. Section 1.5, excuse me, tries to provide a diagram or a picture really as to how you deal with a challenging situation like that. And I think I just want to spend a few minutes really just exploring that diagram. The red circle captures the ideal way to deal with financial pressure in children's social care would be to avoid demand from originating to start with really. If we can deliver services, we can intervene early and the demand doesn't happen. That is an ideal scenario. And there is a project that our colleagues are working on in terms of early help. We provide early help services and we are reviewing the effectiveness of that intervention at this stage. If children come into the care system, the second way to manage an effective resource strategy would be to ensure that we have got an effective placement mix, we have got diversity of provision in the city, as well as the most cost-effective way of delivering those services. And within that, we will be looking at, could be increase the number of foster carers in the city, could be deliver services through IFAs or residential home. So between demand and supply, the next area to look would be, is our services really effective through services review and making sure that we are delivering optimized and cost-effective delivery of services. In addition to that, we're also exploring if our partners are making the right level of contribution, and I think again we have earlier discussion about health services, are they making the right level of contribution? In addition to that, are there options for us to look or seek external funding through grants, and wherever there is a possibility, we would be seeking those opportunities. Moving on to section 1.5.6, that's our quick summary of where we are at this stage. So we've got pressure of £18 million. We have identified potential mitigations, approximately close to £12 million, and that still leaves the committee with a gap of £6 million. I think the next stage would be for us to look at the actual detail, and I think I would suggest that we pause here. If there are any questions on the paper, I will answer those before we get into the appendix.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, I've just got a question on the open part of the paper, and it's actually table 1.5.6. Yeah, as you pointed out, rounding the figures, we started off with 18 million, found savings of 12 million, still leaving a £6 million problem for next year. So my question's in two parts. One, how confident, given, as you've alluded to, that we've got unmet savings from the previous budget, how confident are you that that 12 million is colloquially in the bag? And secondly, on the second line of that table, unmet savings, about 4.2 million in this budget. Is there anything we can do to decrease that amount in this financial year, which will obviously impact on next financial year in a positive way if we can bear down further on that 4.2 million of unmet savings? So how robust are the savings in the bag, and can we do some more with that 4.2?
So I will answer the second question first. I think the 4.2 is an area that we keep looking at, and we will keep reviewing that going forward. And I think the working assumption is that we might be able to make some improvement as time goes by. Further analysis is being done. At this point, it would be difficult to predict what it will look like, but that's an ongoing piece of work that we will do between now and until the end of the financial year to bring that 4.2 million pounds down. I think also the council is expecting us to start looking at a delivery plan around how do we recover that position. So that pressure is also on to reduce that 4.2 million pounds. The second question is more around the level of confidence. I will say is these are initial proposal at this stage, and I think in the appendix when we look at it, there is an overarching rider that more work needs to be done to develop these into proposal, and that might require a bit more work between now and November to give us the confidence to say, well, these savings are in bag 100%. At this moment, I would struggle to suggest that they are all in the bag. These are proposals. We feel confident that they could be delivered. However, providing that level of confidence at this stage might be premature.
Thank you for that honest answer.
Thank you. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you, Chair. Question on energy costs. Has there been anything in recent pronouncements on capping and such like that might give a little bit of hope to the schools in the city?
I've seen some announcement, I've seen some figures coming through. I think that £13.5 million is likely to come down again. The detail has not been fully analysed, but there is an expectation that the £13.5 million may not be as bad as it is spelled out at this moment. But until I see the numbers, it's difficult to make a judgment.
Excuse me, Chair, but it's the sort of difference between having one arm chopped off or both of them, isn't it, really?
Thank you, Councillor Rooney. Councillor Lee.
Well, that was going to be my question. What sort of overtures have been made to the government, and what are they going to be doing? Because all schools are in this position, and we've heard some schools say they want to do a 4-day week, and the government are saying no. So it's obviously, you said there's something coming through, but we're not quite sure how much yet. And just in terms of if they don't meet the full cost of energy for these schools, what happens?
So in terms of the national government, I think there has been an announcement that schools will receive additional funding. Again, the detail has not been actually shared with ourselves, so it's difficult to see what kind of impact would be, but especially for smaller schools, they would struggle. Now, schools in the system do carry some level of reserves, but this is an ongoing pressure on school system. So schools will have to look creatively as to how they manage this. Again, it is slightly premature to answer that question until we know what the impact looks like. There is a discussion item at School Forum on 29th where we will be spending about half an hour on this agenda item with the schools around the implication for the school system and what mitigations could be offered to manage this.
Thank you. Andrew.
Just on Councillor Lee's point about the potential of a 4-day week, maintained schools are legally obliged to open to educate children on 190 days per year regardless. The only scope, I guess, would be to move the days so that there were more days when children were on holiday in the winter than perhaps in the summer. I'm a Sheffield lad, and that's what happened in Sheffield back in the 70s to save energy back in the early 70s. But even that needs a long lead-in time to do that. So I think some of those more innovative ideas that are floating around are probably not likely to come to pass, I think.
I think if I could just come in on that, if we were going to go down that road, what we would have to bear in mind as a council is under the cost of living crisis, having your children at home more during the winter rather than in school puts added pressure on families who are already under pressure. So, you know, it's a big situation that we're in that we really need to be considerate of. Are we now happy to move into closed session? Yeah, thank you. So for members of the public who are watching, we're now going to go into closed session to discuss this paper. We will come back afterwards. Thank you. And welcome back for anyone that's watching. Following on from that debate, I would like to read out the recommendations to members, and the recommendation is that we note the financial pressures for 23-24 detailed within this report. We acknowledge the recommendation approved at the Strategy and Resource Committee on the 5th of July 2022. We note, as this committee's initial response to the Strategy and Resource Committee request set of budget proposals set out in this report and Appendix 1, We note that officers will now work with members to consult with relevant stakeholders, including with partners, trade unions and in respect of equalities and climate change, and on the proposals in this report so as to inform final budget proposals. We note that officers will work to develop any necessary detailed implementation plans for the proposals in this report so that the proposals, if ultimately approved, can be implemented as planned before or during 2023-24 financial year. And we ask to receive a full report in November that will set out the final budget for this committee following consultation and any adjustments requested by the Strategy and Resource Committee. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. We're all in agreement. Thank you. I'd like to close this meeting and thank you everyone for coming along today.